Grizzly and polar bear attacks are some of the most savage wildlife encounters ever recorded, sudden, violent, and often fatal. These apex predators can tear through tents, smash vehicles, and overwhelm even the most experienced outdoorsmen in seconds. Whether it's a tourist group wandering too close to danger or a solo camper asleep in his tent, one misstep can trigger a terrifying fight for survival. In this video, we will dive into 6 chilling tales of bear attacks on humans, from a polar bear killing 9 tourists in 2 minutes to a brown bear escaping a zoo and mauling its keeper. The remote settlement on the western coast of a high-latitude archipelago had witnessed many ill-prepared tourists over the decades, but few quite like the group that arrived on June 27, 2025. The area, once a Soviet mining outpost and now a peculiar travel destination situated near the top of the world, straddled the line between civilization and the vast, unforgiving Arctic wilderness. Its few hundred residents were long accustomed to warning newcomers about the polar bears that roamed the region freely, apex predators that, in many areas, outnumbered humans. Magdalena Thornfield, a 34-year-old travel blogger from Manchester, had organized what she described as an authentic glacier experience for her followers. Her group of 12 included couples, solo travelers, and retirees, all seeking picturesque moments in one of Earth's most isolated frontiers. The local authorities had issued standard advisories about the importance of staying within marked boundaries, carrying flare guns, and remaining constantly vigilant. Warnings posted throughout the area in multiple languages emphasized that polar bears were unpredictable predators capable of moving swiftly across any terrain. Their guide, a weathered 52-year-old Norwegian with 2 decades of Arctic experience, had hesitated before accepting the assignment. The destination was a glacier formation, roughly 3 kilometers from the settlement, accessible via a marked trail that skirted the outer boundary of known bear territory. He made it clear to the group that staying within the flagged route was not negotiable, explaining that the ice formations in the area were frequently used as resting and hunting grounds for the bears. The morning trek went smoothly at first. The glacier itself was a vast, breathtaking landscape, a panorama of jagged crevasses and towering blue ice walls that caught the light like crystalline sculptures. Most of the tourists remained within the designated viewing zone, cameras in hand, marveling at the sheer scale of the frozen terrain. But Magdalena noticed a striking ice wall about 200 meters beyond the marked trail. Its vibrant azure coloring and dramatic texture drew her attention. Convinced it would make for a perfect photograph, she persuaded several members of the group to join her in stepping beyond the safety flags. Among them were Marcus Delacroix, a 29-year-old photographer from France, Harold and Beatrice Winterbottom, an elderly couple from Yorkshire, and Yuki Tanaka, a young travel vlogger from Japan. The 5 moved toward the ice wall, cameras raised, drawn by its visual allure. What they failed to notice was a subtle depression in the snow at the base of the formation. Beneath it, partially hidden in shadow and blending into the snow, lay a massive male polar bear, weighing close to 450 kilograms and measuring nearly 3 meters in length. The bear had created a resting hollow, concealed from view and sheltered by the overhang of ice. Magdalena crouched low, focusing her camera on the textured ice at close range. The clicking of the shutter, though barely audible, was enough to alert the bear. Its black nose twitched, catching the scent of humans. Its small, dark eyes snapped open. Polar bears, unlike other bear species, often regard humans as prey. This particular male, driven by hunger and stress from dwindling sea ice, had not eaten in several days. The movement and sound in such close proximity activated its instincts. The bear rose from its resting place and, in near silence, charged. The attack occurred in seconds. In 3 powerful strides, the bear closed the distance between itself and the nearest person. Magdalena had only enough time to look up before the full weight of the predator slammed into her. The force drove her to the ground, and the bear's jaws clamped down with devastating strength. The others scattered screaming as chaos overtook the pristine landscape. Marcus initially froze in shock, his camera still in hand, before the full horror registered. The Winterbottoms, in their 70s, clung to one another in disbelief. Yuki sprinted back toward the flagged trail, shouting for help. Harold Winterbottom, despite his age, attempted to draw the bear away by waving his bright red coat and making noise. It was a courageous but tragically ineffective effort. The bear, having already been triggered into a heightened predatory state, turned toward him. In moments, the man was struck down with terrifying force. The panic spread. Marcus, paralyzed by fear and unable to move, became the next victim. Beatrice, stunned by what she had witnessed, collapsed in shock and was also attacked. The snow, once undisturbed and glittering in the sunlight, was now stained red and trampled. Several others from the main group reacted instinctively. One pair leapt into a nearby meltwater pool despite the freezing temperature, their bodies submerged in the glacial runoff. Another tourist, desperate to hide, took shelter behind a piece of field equipment left by a research crew earlier in the season. The guide, who had remained with the main group, realized what had happened and immediately called for emergency assistance. However, a critical mistake soon became evident. His emergency flare gun, a required item in such environments, had been left behind at the visitor center. He had considered it unnecessary for what was meant to be a simple, controlled hike. Rescue teams arrived 40 minutes later, dispatched from the settlement after receiving the distress call. They were met with a scene of devastation. 9 bodies lay scattered across the snow, silent witnesses to what had occurred. The bear was gone, having vanished back into the vast Arctic wilderness. Of the original group, only 3 survived. They were evacuated by helicopter to a medical facility on the mainland, suffering from severe hypothermia and psychological trauma. The scale of the tragedy stunned officials and quickly circulated across international media outlets. It became the deadliest polar bear encounter in the recorded history of the region. Authorities conducted a full investigation. They found that while the trail was properly marked and the safety guidelines had been clearly communicated, the decision to venture beyond the designated area and the lack of proper emergency equipment contributed directly to the loss of life. Though no charges were filed, the guide's judgment was scrutinized heavily. In the aftermath, a memorial was placed near the trailhead, simple stones marked with the names of those lost. Local officials revised safety policies for Arctic tours, mandating the presence of armed personnel and stricter enforcement of route adherence. The event stood as a sobering reminder of the unforgiving nature of polar regions. Amidst the frozen beauty lies danger that cannot be underestimated. In a place where the wild rules without hesitation, even a moment's lapse in judgment can carry irreversible consequences. Kodiak Island, the emerald jewel of Alaska's southern coast, had long served as a backdrop for countless wildlife documentaries since the 1960s. Its 3,500 square miles were home to the world's largest brown bears, formidable creatures capable of weighing over 1,500 pounds and standing 10 feet tall when upright. A protected wildlife area safeguarded these apex predators and the salmon-rich ecosystems they depended on, forming a fragile balance between conservation and human curiosity that wildlife filmmakers approached with mixed results. In September 2019, a documentary crew from a Northern Europe-based production company arrived on Kodiak Island to capture the annual salmon runs for their upcoming wilderness series. The team consisted of director Astrid Henriksen, cameraman Dmitry Volkov, sound engineer Sarah Chen, and their wildlife expert, Peter Volkov, a 41-year-old Russian-American survivalist whose reputation for bold encounters with dangerous animals had made him a frequently hired consultant in the documentary world. Peter had spent over 15 years studying bear behavior across both North America and Siberia. He advocated a philosophy he termed respectful coexistence, which rejected conventional safety tools like bear spray, firearms, or loud deterrents. Instead, Peter promoted the idea that understanding bear psychology and projecting calmness could allow humans and bears to occupy shared space without conflict. His unorthodox methods had earned recognition from some wildlife groups, though others in the field expressed growing concern over the increasing risk in his hands-off approach. The crew set up base near the Karluk River, a prime location where sockeye salmon amassed during their spawning season. Local Alutiiq guides warned the group about a particularly large male bear frequently seen in the area, identifiable by a deep scar across its left shoulder. Weighing over 200 pounds, the bear had developed increasingly aggressive territorial tendencies in recent weeks. On the third day of filming, September 15th, Peter opted to demonstrate his passive observation technique on camera. The morning's footage had been productive, with multiple bears filmed catching salmon in the shallows. Still, Peter expressed dissatisfaction, stating that the footage lacked intimacy and failed to differentiate their series from others in the saturated genre. Around 2 p.m., the scarred male arrived at a bend in the river, taking a prime fishing position where salmon naturally pooled. Peter studied the bear's posture for several minutes, interpreting it as calm and focused on feeding. Despite crew concerns about the animal's size and their proximity to a narrow stretch of riverbank, Peter decided to approach, slowly and deliberately, until he was approximately 40 feet from the bear. The camera continued rolling as Peter moved with calculated care. The bear briefly acknowledged his presence with a glance but resumed fishing, seeming to confirm Peter's confidence in his approach. For nearly 20 minutes, the method worked. The footage they captured was remarkable. Close-range shots of one of the planet's largest land predators, seemingly indifferent to human presence. But the bear's behavior began to shift around 2:30 p.m. Later review revealed that the animal had sustained injuries, likely from a recent fight with another dominant male. The wounds, hidden beneath thick fur, had become infected and were likely causing pain and irritation. The first visible change was subtle. The bear raised its head, sniffed the air, and stilled. Peter, maintaining his posture, believed this to be routine behavior, but the animal's ears flattened, and its posture shifted, no longer relaxed, but tense and alert. What followed defied Peter's theories. Without issuing typical warning signs, no jaw-popping, no huffing, no bluff charges, the bear launched forward. It crossed the 40-foot distance in under 3 seconds, its massive frame driven by unfiltered aggression and pain. Peter stood motionless, seemingly expecting the bear to stop short, but this time there was no bluff. The impact struck with brutal force, flinging him backward onto the rocky riverbank. The bear landed on top of him, claws and teeth delivering fatal injuries in a matter of moments. Dmitri kept filming, his instincts overriding shock as the rest of the crew watched in horror. The bear pinned Peter beneath its weight, its jaws clamping onto his back while claws raked his torso. The attack continued for roughly 30 seconds before falling into eerie silence. A local guide stationed upstream, Thomas Moonen, had been positioned with emergency equipment, including a flare gun and bear spray, but under Peter's strict instructions, Thomas had been told never to intervene without explicit direction. That guidance, intended to preserve the integrity of observational techniques, left him frozen with uncertainty. By the time Thomas fired a flare to scare the animal off, the attack was over. The sudden light and sound startled the bear, which retreated into the dense alder thickets flanking the river. Emergency responders from the nearest Coast Guard station arrived within 2 hours, but Peter was pronounced dead at the scene due to massive trauma and internal injuries. Investigators later confirmed that the bear had been involved in multiple recent territorial fights, which likely exacerbated its aggressive response. Wildlife officials noted that pain-induced agitation is common in large predators, reinforcing the unpredictability of such encounters, especially when signs of injury are not visible. The footage documenting Peter's final moments was immediately secured by authorities and was never made public. The production was canceled, and the remaining crew members underwent trauma recovery support. The event sent ripples through the wildlife film industry, sparking renewed debate over the limits of human-animal interaction. Within professional circles, the tragedy became a cautionary tale, a sobering example of the danger inherent in projecting human logic onto wild creatures and disregarding time-tested safety protocols. Peter Volkov had believed that trust and intuition could bridge the divide between species. But in the heart of the Alaskan wilderness, nature offered a stark and final rebuttal. The Flathead Valley in southeastern British Columbia stretched across 1,500 square kilometers of pristine wilderness, where the Canadian Rockies met vast expanses of boreal forest. This remote region, shared between Canada and Montana, served as critical habitat for grizzly bears, mountain goats, and countless other species that required undisturbed territory to survive. The Flathead River wound through the valley like a silver ribbon, creating isolated turnouts and camping spots that attracted both wildlife and the occasional adventurous tourist willing to navigate the rough logging roads that served as the area's primary access routes. In August 2017, Zara Pemberton, a 24-year-old graduate student from Vancouver, and her boyfriend Marcus Chen, a 26-year-old software developer, decided to explore the Flathead Valley during their summer vacation. Both avid hikers and photographers, they had researched the area extensively and understood the risks associated with grizzly bear country. Their compact hatchback was equipped with bear spray, a first aid kit, and enough supplies for a 3-day camping expedition in one of British Columbia's most remote accessible regions. The couple had been dating for 2 years and shared a passion for wilderness photography that had taken them to numerous remote locations across Western Canada. However, neither had encountered large predators on previous expeditions, and their knowledge of bear behavior came primarily from online resources and informational brochures rather than practical experience in genuinely dangerous situations. On August 14th, they drove a rough Forest Service road to a scenic turnout approximately 40 kilometers from the nearest settlement. The location offered spectacular views of the Flathead River and the surrounding peaks, with opportunities to photograph both landscape and wildlife. Local forestry workers had warned about increased grizzly activity in the area due to a particularly abundant huckleberry season, which was drawing bears down from higher elevations. The couple arrived at the turnout around 3 p.m. and spent the afternoon photographing the river valley and surrounding forest. Their plan involved camping overnight at the turnout before exploring hiking trails the following morning. As evening approached, they took advantage of the golden light for photography, setting up outside the vehicle with the hatchback open to access camera equipment quickly. What they failed to notice was a large male grizzly bear that had been foraging for berries in the dense undergrowth approximately 200 meters from the turnout. The bear, weighing an estimated 400 pounds and standing nearly 4 feet at the shoulder, had become habituated to human presence after multiple encounters with forestry crews and recreational vehicles over the summer months. Instead of avoiding human activity, it had learned to associate it with potential food sources. While Zara was adjusting her telephoto lens and Marcus was reviewing images on his camera's screen, the grizzly emerged from the tree line behind their vehicle. It approached with the confident gait of an animal unafraid of people, its massive head swaying as it tested the air for interesting scents. Neither of them noticed the predator until it was within 30 meters. Marcus spotted the bear first and reacted by alerting Zara. In a panicked rush toward the vehicle, their coordination faltered. During the scramble, Marcus accidentally kicked their backpack, containing car keys, bear spray, and emergency supplies, sending it tumbling down an embankment toward the river. They managed to get inside the vehicle and slam the doors, but their relief quickly turned to dread. The keys and bear spray were out of reach, and their cell phones showed no signal in the remote valley. Meanwhile, the grizzly had found the abandoned backpack and began investigating its contents with interest. After pawing through the supplies for several minutes, the bear lost interest and turned its attention to the vehicle. Grizzly bears are highly intelligent and curious, making the situation increasingly dangerous as the animal began methodically examining the car. It circled repeatedly, pressing its nose against the windows and even testing the door handles. Around sunset, the bear's behavior escalated. It climbed onto the hood of the vehicle, causing the suspension to groan under its weight. Zara and Marcus remained motionless inside as the bear scratched deep gouges into the paint while trying to gain traction. At one point, its enormous head loomed against the windshield, its small dark eyes reflecting a disturbing level of awareness. The bear remained on or near the vehicle for approximately 4 hours, occasionally wandering off to forage before returning to examine the car again. As night fell, Zara and Marcus realized they were trapped, with no means of communication or escape. The temperature dropped to near freezing, and condensation from their breath fogged the windows, further isolating them and adding to their growing fear. The nocturnal visits proved even more terrifying than the initial encounter. Twice during the night, the bear returned and rocked the vehicle violently, as if testing whether it could gain entry. The frame creaked under the repeated strain, and the occupants feared the windows might eventually give way. Morning brought little relief. The grizzly remained in the vicinity, maintaining its presence near the turnout. By dawn, Zara was experiencing severe anxiety, while Marcus showed signs of dehydration from stress-induced sweating and lack of water intake. Both were physically and emotionally distressed, knowing help might not arrive in time. At approximately 10 a.m., a forestry truck appeared on the road and rounded the curve toward the turnout. The driver, experienced in such situations, immediately assessed the scene and used the vehicle's horn to scare the bear back into the forest. He radioed for additional support before checking on the couple. Wildlife officers arrived within 2 hours to escort Zara and Marcus safely from the area. They required medical attention for dehydration and acute stress, while their car sustained significant damage from the bear's prolonged investigation. Authorities later tracked the Grizzly using its distinctive markings, discovering it had previously been relocated after earlier encounters with humans. The incident underscored the dangers of backcountry travel without thorough preparation and emphasized the importance of secure food and gear storage, even during short stops. Both Zara and Marcus underwent counseling to cope with post-traumatic stress. Following the encounter, they avoided wilderness areas for over a year after coming face-to-face with one of North America's most powerful predators. The region surrounding a large provincial park in Ontario stretched across nearly 8,000 square kilometers of pristine Canadian wilderness, encompassing vast forests of maple, birch, and pine that had remained largely unchanged since the last ice age. Harold Grimsby, a 68-year-old retired teacher from the town of Whitney, had spent 4 decades exploring the forests near the park. His reputation as an expert forager was well established among locals, who often sought his advice on mushroom identification and seasonal harvesting locations. His weekly expeditions had become well known for their success, as he possessed an almost uncanny ability to locate prized mushrooms like morels, chanterelles, and oyster varieties in places others overlooked. October 2021 brought an exceptionally productive mushroom season due to warm September rains, followed by cool autumn temperatures. Harold had already filled his freezer with enough fungi to last through the winter, but his passion for foraging compelled him to continue exploring new areas as long as favorable conditions persisted. His wife, Margaret, was accustomed to his solo outings and trusted his extensive wilderness experience to keep him safe in environments where others might struggle. On October 15th, Harold departed for what he considered a routine morning of mushroom hunting in a mixed forest approximately 12 kilometers northeast of Whitney. The area was known for its abundance of oyster mushrooms, which thrived on decaying hardwood trees. He had visited this stretch of forest many times without incident, using established deer trails that connected productive sites across several square kilometers of crownland. His routine involved parking at a Forest Service road intersection and hiking roughly 2 kilometers into the woods along familiar paths. He carried only the essentials: a canvas mushroom bag, a folding knife, a thermos of coffee, and basic emergency items such as a whistle and flashlight. With decades of experience, Harold rarely relied on navigation tools, orienting himself with long-memorized natural landmarks. That morning, the forest showed signs of recent black bear activity, claw marks on trees and overturned logs from foraging. However, such signs were typical during the fall as bears prepared for hibernation. Harold had seen black bears on several occasions over the years, but the animals typically retreated at the first sign of human presence. Wildlife officials would later determine that a mature male black bear, weighing approximately 180 kilograms, had been frequenting the area in recent weeks. This particular bear had shown an unusual level of boldness. Local residents had reported sightings of it rummaging through garbage bins and approaching cabins without displaying the usual fear response expected of wild bears. Its behavior was likely influenced by the severe drought conditions that had affected the region during the summer. Natural food sources, such as berries, nuts, and insects, had become scarce, forcing bears to widen their search areas. Additionally, shifting climate patterns had disrupted hibernation timing, leading to increased stress and longer periods of activity. Harold's fatal encounter occurred approximately 300 meters off his usual trail, in a small clearing where he had found a patch of late-season mushrooms growing on a fallen oak. The bear likely approached from downwind, allowing it to get quite close before Harold noticed. Evidence from the scene suggested the confrontation was sudden and violent. Search and rescue personnel discovered Harold's body after Margaret reported him missing when he did not return by evening. Investigators from local law enforcement documented that his body had been partially concealed under forest debris. His mushroom bag lay nearby, untouched and still containing the day's harvest, eliminating food attraction as the likely trigger. The bear responsible was found approximately 50 meters from the scene and displayed no fear when the search team arrived. Conservation officers attempted to drive it away using loud noises and other deterrents, but the bear remained in place. It was ultimately euthanized for public safety. Its behavior confirmed that it no longer responded to humans with the usual caution. Autopsy findings showed that Harold had suffered fatal injuries to the neck and torso, consistent with a black bear attack. However, the absence of feeding behavior puzzled investigators, as black bears almost never attack humans without provocation or food motivation. The evidence pointed to a short but highly aggressive encounter. Wildlife biologists conducted a thorough examination of the bear. They found no disease or physical condition to account for the aggression. The animal appeared healthy and adequately nourished, contradicting the theory of desperation-driven behavior. Genetic testing confirmed the bear was native to the area, ruling out the possibility of displacement from a more heavily impacted habitat. Experts concluded that a combination of factors likely contributed to the attack: ecological stress from drought, disrupted behavioral patterns due to climate change, and increasingly frequent human activity near bear habitats. These elements may have created a unique set of conditions that triggered the attack. Harold's death marked only the second recorded fatal black bear attack in Ontario's modern history, underscoring the rarity of such events. In response, authorities expanded wildlife monitoring programs and launched educational efforts to inform the public about evolving animal behavior linked to environmental changes. The tragedy deeply affected the Whitney community, where Harold was beloved for his generosity and deep knowledge of the natural world. In his memory, Margaret established a fund to support wildlife research with the hope that greater understanding of animal behavior might help prevent similar incidents. The forest where Harold lost his life remained open to the public, now marked with signs warning visitors about the unpredictable nature of wildlife in a changing environment. A vast protected forest in northwestern Wyoming spanned over 2.4 million acres of rugged wilderness, making it the first federally designated national forest in the United States and one of the most pristine ecosystems remaining in the American West. Tobias Hendricks, a 35-year-old mechanical engineer from Denver, had spent over 15 years backpacking through remote wilderness areas across Colorado, Wyoming, and Montana. He was drawn to solo expeditions that challenged his self-reliance and offered uninterrupted access to nature's raw beauty. His extensive experience gave him a deep understanding of backcountry safety protocols and wildlife behavior, particularly in regions inhabited by large predators. In September 2020, Tobias embarked on a 5-day solo backpacking trip through a remote wilderness region known for its rugged terrain and healthy grizzly bear population. His planned route followed infrequently used trails that passed through high alpine meadows and dense valleys, areas that saw few visitors during the shoulder season between summer and winter. As always, Tobias meticulously prepared. He reviewed topographic maps, weather forecasts, and recent wildlife activity reports. His gear included a bear-proof food canister, bear spray, and the full array of safety equipment recommended for backcountry travel in grizzly country. Years of experience had taught him the importance of food storage, campsite selection, and scent management when traveling through predator territory. On September 18th, the third day of his trip, Tobias set up camp beside a mountain stream in a small clearing surrounded by dense pines. The site, approximately 8 kilometers from the nearest marked trail, offered fresh water, flat ground, and total solitude. He followed standard bear-safe camping practices by placing his food and scented items in a bear-resistant canister more than 100 meters from his tent. Despite these precautions, Tobias unknowingly made a critical error in campsite selection. His chosen location sat directly beside a game trail, frequently used by wildlife to access the stream. Even more concerning, his tent was positioned downwind from a natural mineral deposit that drew animals throughout the night. Around midnight, a mature female grizzly, estimated to weigh about 350 pounds, approached the campsite. Though Tobias had taken great care with food storage, residual human scent on his gear and clothing may have attracted the bear. Grizzly bears possess incredibly sensitive noses, capable of detecting odors from several kilometers away, making total scent elimination nearly impossible. The bear's initial focus was the tent exterior, where she sniffed and examined the scent-saturated nylon fabric. Having likely encountered human camps before without consequences, she showed little hesitation. Her curiosity was heightened by the compact concentration of human scent in and around the tent. Tobias awoke to the sound of claws scraping against the rainfly as the bear probed the tent. Within seconds, her powerful claws tore through the fabric. Tobias found himself eye to eye with the grizzly's head as it pushed through a rip in the tent, illuminated by the beam of his headlamp. The encounter escalated instantly. Surprised by the close-range human presence, the bear lashed out defensively. A single swipe of her paw tore through Tobias's chest and shoulder, opening deep wounds and hurling him against the opposite side of the tent. Despite severe pain and shock, Tobias's training and preparation proved crucial. He managed to locate the bear spray he had kept within reach and discharged it at the bear's face. The concentrated cloud of capsaicin overwhelmed the bear's sensitive senses, prompting her to retreat toward the nearby stream, snorting and vocalizing in distress as she fled. Using the brief window of safety, Tobias assessed his condition. His injuries were serious, but did not appear to involve vital organs. Bleeding heavily and experiencing the onset of shock, he gathered essential gear and began the long trek toward the nearest trailhead. Navigating by headlamp and starlight, Tobias slowly covered the 8 kilometers over the next 6 hours. He stopped frequently to rest and apply rudimentary first aid while continuing to lose blood. At dawn, he reached the parking area and collapsed beside his vehicle, where early arriving hikers discovered him. Emergency responders were contacted via satellite phone, and he was airlifted to a regional trauma center. His injuries required extensive treatment and left lasting scars, but he survived with no damage to vital structures. Wildlife officials later concluded that the bear's behavior was not predatory, but rather a defensive reaction to unexpected human presence in a high-traffic wildlife area. Since the bear did not continue the attack and showed no further aggression, it was not relocated or euthanized. The incident served as a reminder that even experienced outdoors people can become vulnerable in truly wild environments. Tobias eventually returned to backpacking after his recovery, but adopted new habits, including carrying multiple bear spray canisters and avoiding campsites near known animal corridors. His encounter emphasized that, even with the best preparation, humans remain vulnerable in the domain of apex predators. A mid-sized zoological facility in southwestern Germany had operated with a respected reputation since 1933, housing over 300 species across 15 hectares of carefully designed habitats. Located in the Baden-Württemberg region, the zoo prided itself on modern animal husbandry practices and had earned accreditation from a major European zoo and aquarium association for its conservation efforts and educational programs. The facility's brown bear exhibit, constructed in 1987 and renovated in 2003, featured a naturalistic enclosure with artificial caves, a swimming pool, and dense vegetation intended to replicate the animal's natural forest environment. The zoo's brown bear population consisted of 2 individuals, a 12-year-old female and a massive 8-year-old male weighing approximately 320 kilograms. The male had arrived from a Czech breeding facility in 2015 as part of a coordinated European endangered species breeding program. His impressive size and confident demeanor made him a popular attraction among visitors, although zookeepers had noted an increase in territorial behavior as he reached full maturity. Maintenance operations at the facility followed strict protocols established by both German animal welfare regulations and international zoo safety standards. The bear enclosure featured multiple levels of containment, including primary barriers separating animals from public areas and secondary containment systems intended to prevent escapes during routine maintenance procedures. These protocols had been tested and refined over decades of operation without serious incidents. On March 22, 2018, a routine inspection of the bear exhibit's infrastructure was scheduled to address minor repairs to one of the artificial cave structures. The maintenance crew, led by the facility's chief engineer, planned to examine drainage systems and replace worn concrete surfaces while the bears were secured in their indoor holding areas. This type of work typically required several hours to complete and was performed monthly during the off-season when visitor numbers were reduced. The inspection revealed that one of the secondary containment gates had developed a mechanical problem with its locking mechanism. The gate, which separated the bear's outdoor habitat from a service corridor used by zoo personnel, featured an electronic locking system controlled remotely from the keeper facilities. However, the electronic components had malfunctioned due to moisture infiltration, causing the lock to disengage intermittently without triggering alarm systems. The engineering team attempted to repair the electronic lock mechanism on site rather than schedule a comprehensive replacement procedure. Their decision to perform temporary repairs proved catastrophic when they failed to properly secure the manual backup locking system while working on the electronic components. The maintenance log later showed that the chief engineer had signed off on the repair work remotely without physically inspecting the completed installation, violating established safety protocols. A 34-year-old senior keeper with 8 years of experience at the facility arrived for her morning shift on March 23rd, unaware of the previous day's maintenance activities. Her routine included feeding the bears and conducting daily health assessments before the zoo opened to visitors. She had worked with the male bear since his arrival and believed she had developed a respectful working relationship with the powerful animal. Her morning began as usual, preparing the bear's breakfast in the keeper kitchen adjacent to the exhibit. The meal consisted of fruits, vegetables, fish, and specially formulated nutrition pellets. This routine had been performed hundreds of times without incident, as the bear typically remained in his indoor holding area during feeding, while outdoor spaces were cleaned and inspected. Upon entering the service corridor with the prepared food, she immediately noticed the bear's absence from his usual location in the indoor holding area. Her initial assumption was that the animal had gained access to the outdoor habitat, perhaps due to a keeper error the previous evening. However, as she approached the feeding station, she discovered the bear calmly investigating a row of garbage containers approximately 20 meters from the staff kitchen. The sight of a 320-kilogram brown bear outside its containment system triggered an immediate physiological fear response. Her training had emphasized the danger posed by brown bears under any conditions, with uncontained encounters representing the highest level of risk. The bear's calm demeanor offered little reassurance, as such animals can shift from docile to aggressive behavior in seconds when surprised or challenged. Choosing to freeze in place nearly cost her life. The bear detected her presence and turned to investigate the familiar human in an unfamiliar context. Bears have strong memories and can distinguish between routine and irregular events. This recognition appeared to provoke a territorial response rather than a feeding one. The bear charged, covering the distance in less than 3 seconds and displaying the explosive speed that makes brown bears formidable predators. Her attempt to flee toward the kitchen was futile, as the bear could reach speeds over 50 kilometers per hour in short bursts. The initial strike knocked her to the ground. The bear then attempted to pin her with his massive weight, biting down on her left leg while his claws tore deep lacerations into her back. The weight of the 320-kilogram animal compressed her chest, impeding her breathing and risking internal injuries from the pressure. A maintenance worker cleaning a nearby facility witnessed the attack. His immediate response was to grab a fire extinguisher from an emergency station and discharge it directly into the bear's face. The sudden blast of irritant chemicals and loud noise startled the bear enough to interrupt the attack, giving the injured keeper a chance to crawl toward the staff kitchen while the animal retreated several meters. Zoo security and veterinary staff responded quickly, deploying tranquilizer darts to subdue the bear before he could resume the attack or move further through the facility. The injured keeper was transported to a nearby university hospital, where she underwent emergency surgery for a fractured pelvis, multiple lacerations, and internal trauma caused by the bear's crushing weight. Her survival was credited to the maintenance workers' quick thinking and the short duration of the attack. The subsequent investigation concluded that the maintenance team's failure to secure the secondary containment gate had enabled the bear to enter areas intended only for authorized personnel. The malfunctioning electronic lock, compounded by the improper engagement of the manual override, led to a cascade of safety breaches that nearly resulted in a fatality. The facility's chief engineer faced criminal charges for negligent practices that endangered staff and public safety. The bear was not euthanized, as wildlife experts determined his behavior to be consistent with natural instincts triggered by an abnormal situation. He was relocated to a high-security wildlife management center in Eastern Europe that specializes in housing dangerous animals. The bear exhibit at the original zoo was completely redesigned with enhanced containment infrastructure and redundant safety systems before reopening to the public 18 months later.